Siblings. Have your parents ever turned you into rivals by constantly comparing your achievements and love for them? My mother designed a peculiar system where only the sibling with the best academic record received luxuries, warm meals, a personal room, and bedtime affection. The rest of us were given nothing. When I chose not to undermine my siblings, as she had intended, I was banished to a mattress in the garage and forced to eat standing at the kitchen counter. Then, a 2 a.m. call came from my youngest sister, Lynn, a faint whisper for help from the basement where our mother had imprisoned her for destroying her tests. I found Lynn weighing a mere 89 pounds, with infected cuts on her arms. Growing up, my parents' only form of recognition was for achieving superior grades. I recall being 6 years old, returning home with a B, while my brother arrived with an A. That evening, he enjoyed takeout, stayed up past his bedtime watching cartoons, and went toy shopping. My reward was his cold leftovers and sleeping without blankets in the heart of January. My mother termed this the golden child system. Each report card day, she would assemble my 3 siblings and me in the living room, meticulously reviewing our grades one by one. The individual with the highest GPA became the golden child for that academic period, receiving every perk: hot meals, a private room with heating, goodnight hugs, and weekend excursions to the mall. The rest of us received nothing. Initially, my siblings and I simply intensified our efforts. I would study late into the night, using a flashlight beneath my covers. My younger brother, Piper, read during recess. My sister, Ava, practiced math problems during lunch. However, something shifted as we entered middle school. My youngest sister, Lynn, began adding sleeping pills to Piper's morning orange juice before significant examinations. Ava would delete my essays from the family computer, attributing it to a system glitch. Piper started concealing my textbooks. Our mother relished this. She would discover Ava's hidden collection of my homework and smile, remarking, "Clever girl. You understand how the world operates." As the eldest, I was perhaps the most foolish for refusing to engage in their game. When I found Lynn crying over a failed science test, I helped her prepare for the retake. When Piper's calculator broke before his algebra final, I lent him mine. I held on to the belief that demonstrating kindness would halt our mutual sabotage. But then one night, Mother caught me assisting Lynn with her biology homework. She seized my hair, yanking me from the chair so violently that I felt strands detach from my scalp. She dragged me to my room and propelled me against the wall. "You're making her weak," she hissed, her breath heavy with the scent of wine. After that evening, she relocated my mattress to the garage, believing that failures did not merit comfort. My bedroom door was removed from its hinges, as privacy was reserved for victors. I ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter while my siblings sat at the table. The most difficult part was observing their expressions. They appeared remorseful but remained silent, too fearful of Mother. That night, I resolved to rebel quietly by maintaining a C average throughout high school, just enough to pass, but sufficiently low to communicate that she could not break my spirit. My siblings, on the other hand, all achieved exceptional GPAs and received scholarship offers, but they also suffered from ulcers, anxiety attacks, and hidden prescriptions. Ava was hospitalized during her junior year for excessive Adderall use. The situation escalated to a head the night before graduation. Mother changed the house locks while I was at work. I returned home to find my belongings scattered across the lawn. My baby pictures were torn and strewn in the driveway. My mother stood in the doorway, her arms around my siblings. "Don't come back until you're worth something," she declared. I saw Lynn begin to speak, but Mother's sharp glance rendered her face pale. She said nothing. They all watched me load my car in the rain, and no one offered assistance. At my graduation the following day, the reserved seats in the front row remained conspicuously empty. College life was initially disorienting. My roommate's parents visited for Thanksgiving and brought me a pie, feeling sorry that I was staying on campus. His mother hugged me, and I flinched so intensely that I knocked over a lamp. My psychology professor complimented my essay, and I experienced a panic attack in the bathroom, anticipating some form of reprisal. I slept on the floor for a month, as the bed felt wrong, too soft and undeserved. Mid-semester, I called home once to check on my siblings. What I learned was distressing, though not entirely surprising. Piper reported that all my siblings had started secretly recording each other's conversations to detect any missteps. Lynn had installed hidden cameras in Ava's room to catch her cheating or neglecting her studies, intending to report to Mother. Ava had begun pilfering Piper's medication. The competition intensified in my absence. For some to win, others had to lose. It was truly heartbreaking to hear. I began to devise a way out for my siblings. I was making progress when Lynn called me last week. Her voice trembled, a hushed whisper, as if Mother might overhear through the walls. "I can't survive this anymore," she pleaded. "Please come save us. I'm so sorry for everything." I remember hearing a loud thud immediately after, followed by my mother shouting something incoherent. I tried to yell, but the line went dead. It was 2 a.m., but I still rushed outside and got in my car to begin a 4-hour drive home. Upon arrival, I found Lynn locked in the basement. It turned out Mother had converted it into a windowless study room with a lock on the outside. Lynn weighed only 89 pounds. She showed me infected cuts on her arms from stress-induced scratching. She had been burning her tests to avoid Mother's achievement board, but Mother had caught her. She hadn't been permitted to use the bathroom in 3 days. Buckets stood in the corner. Mother came rushing down, screaming about how I was ruining her winter. I carried Lynn to my car while Mother followed us outside, shrieking that we were both failures and deserved each other. As I drove away, Lynn was semi-conscious in the passenger seat. I kept checking the rearview mirror as we drove, half expecting to see Mother's car trailing us. Lynn had completely passed out, her breathing shallow but steady. The hospital was another hour away, and I pressed harder on the gas pedal. When we finally reached the emergency room, the nurses took one look at Lynn and swiftly moved her to the back. I completed paperwork with trembling hands, listing myself as her emergency contact. The receptionist inquired about insurance, and I presented my student card, hoping my university coverage would be sufficient. 3 hours later, a doctor emerged to speak with me. Lynn was severely malnourished and dehydrated. The cuts on her arms were infected and required antibiotics. They wanted to keep her for observation. I nodded at everything he said, trying not to dwell on how I would afford it all. Lynn woke up around noon the next day. She appeared so small in the hospital bed, hooked up to 4 fluids. When she saw me sitting in the chair beside her, tears began to stream down her cheeks. I grasped her hand and squeezed it gently. She squeezed back, and we sat like that for a long time without speaking. Eventually, she told me everything. How Mother had worsened after I left, how the competition among siblings had turned vicious, how she had been confined in that basement for 2 weeks, only allowed out for an hour each day to shower and change clothes. The nurse brought Lynn some broth and crackers. She ate slowly, wincing with each swallow. I helped her sit up and adjust the pillows behind her back. When she finished eating, she looked at me with hollow eyes. I knew what she was silently asking. Could we go back for Piper and Ava? Were they suffering too? Part of me wanted to say no. They had watched Mother discard my belongings on the lawn. They had participated in the sabotage for years, but then I remembered they were victims too, merely striving to survive in their own ways. That evening, I called Piper from the hospital lobby. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice hushed. I told him Lynn was safe, and asked if he wanted to leave too. There was a long pause, then he hung up. I tried calling back, but he didn't answer. I tried Ava next. She picked up immediately, almost as if she'd been waiting. Before I could say anything, she started talking rapidly. Mother knew I'd taken Lynn. She was furious. She'd already changed the locks again, and installed security cameras. Ava's voice cracked as she recounted how Mother had moved all of Lynn's belongings to the curb and burned them in the backyard. I asked Ava if she wanted out. Another long pause. Then she whispered that she couldn't talk anymore, and hung up. I stood in that hospital lobby feeling helpless. How could I save people who didn't want to be saved? Lynn was discharged after 4 days. The bill was astronomical, but the hospital arranged a payment plan. I drove us back to my college apartment, stopping at a thrift store to buy her some clothes and basic necessities. My roommate was away for winter break, so Lynn used his bed. Those first few days were difficult. Lynn jumped at every sound. She'd wake up screaming from nightmares. She constantly apologized for things that weren't her fault. I prepared simple meals for her and didn't push her to talk. Slowly, she began to relax. She even smiled once when I burned our mac and cheese because I was distracted with homework. A week after we'd left, my phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Piper. His voice was shaking. Mother had found his hidden stash of anxiety medication and flushed it all. He was going through withdrawal and didn't know what to do. I told him to pack a bag and meet me at the gas station 2 blocks from the house. I left Lynn sleeping and drove through the night again. Piper was waiting at the gas station, hunched over with a backpack. He looked terrible, sweating, shaking, with dark circles under his eyes. He climbed into my car without a word. The drive back was silent except for Piper's occasional groans. I stopped at a 24-hour pharmacy and explained the situation to the pharmacist. She couldn't give him medication without a prescription, but she suggested an urgent care clinic that opened at 7 a.m. We waited in the parking lot until they opened. The doctor at urgent care was understanding. He prescribed a small amount of medication to help with withdrawal and gave us a referral to a psychiatrist. Piper took the first dose right there in the exam room. When we got back to my apartment, Lynn was awake and making coffee. She froze when she saw Piper, then ran over and hugged him. He hugged her back and they both started crying. I left them alone and went to take a shower, letting the hot water wash away the exhaustion. Over the next few days, the 3 of us established a routine. I went to classes while they stayed in the apartment. Lynn started teaching herself to cook from YouTube videos. Piper meticulously organized my bookshelf and cleaned obsessively, needing something to control. In the evenings, we'd eat dinner together at my tiny kitchen table. Nobody sat on the floor or stood at the counter. Then Ava called. Mother had expelled her. She'd caught Ava trying to call me and went ballistic. Ava was at a friend's house, but couldn't stay there long. I gave her my address and told her to take a bus. She arrived the next evening with a suitcase and a black eye. Mother had hit her with a textbook. We didn't discuss it. I just got her some ice and made up a bed on the couch. That night, all four of us were together for the first time in years without Mother hovering over us. But I knew this was just the beginning. Mother wouldn't let us go that easily. She'd already left dozens of voicemails calling us ungrateful failures. She'd shown up at my university looking for me, but campus security turned her away. She'd filed a missing persons report for Lynn, claiming I'd kidnapped her. The police showed up at my apartment to do a welfare check. Lynn told them she was 18 and had left voluntarily. They seemed satisfied and left, but I knew Mother would try something else. She always had another move planned. My siblings were struggling, too. They'd been conditioned for so long to compete with each other that cooperation felt foreign. Ava hoarded food in her suitcase. Piper timed how long everyone used the bathroom. Lynn apologized constantly for taking up space. Old habits died hard. We needed help, real professional help. I made appointments with the counseling center at my university. They had a sliding scale payment option. I also reached out to legal aid about getting restraining orders. The lawyer said we had a strong case given the documented abuse. But even as I tried to build us a new life, I could feel Mother's presence looming. She knew where I went to school. She had ways of finding information, and she'd never admit defeat. The golden child system had been her life's work. We were her trophies, her proof that her methods worked. I started varying my route to class, checking over my shoulder constantly. I installed new locks on my apartment door and a security bar for extra protection. I taught my siblings our emergency plan if Mother showed up. We were living in fear, but at least we were living. One morning, I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. Mother's handwriting. You can't hide forever. A real family sticks together. Come home before it's too late. My hands shook as I read it. She'd been here. She'd stood right outside while we slept. I showed the note to my siblings at breakfast. Lynn went pale. Piper's hands started trembling, but Ava surprised me. She grabbed the note and tore it into pieces. She can't control us anymore, she said firmly. It was the first time any of them had shown defiance. That afternoon, we all went to the counseling center together. The therapist was kind but direct. She explained that what we'd experienced was severe psychological abuse. That Mother system had pitted us against each other to maintain control. That healing would take time and effort from all of us. As we walked back to my apartment after the session, something felt different. We were walking side by side instead of in a line. Nobody was checking to see who was walking faster or straighter. For the first time, we felt like actual siblings instead of competitors. But I knew our fight wasn't over. Mother was still out there planning her next move, and we were still learning how to trust each other after years of sabotage and betrayal. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but at least now we were walking it together. That night, as we sat around my small living room doing homework and watching TV, I realized something. We might have lost our childhood to Mother's twisted system, but we still had a chance at a real future where love wasn't conditional on achievement and family meant support instead of competition. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Piper discovered Mother had canceled his health insurance. The psychiatrist appointment we'd scheduled was now impossible without paying out of pocket. He paced the apartment, pulling at his hair while I made frantic calls to the university health center. They could see him in 2 weeks, but his medication would run out before then. Lynn suggested we try different pharmacies to see if anyone would help. We spent the entire day driving from one to another, explaining our situation. Each pharmacist shook their heads sympathetically but firmly. Without a valid prescription, they couldn't help. Piper grew more agitated with each rejection, his withdrawal symptoms worsening. That evening, Ava surprised us all. She'd been quietly researching online and found a telehealth service that could prescribe medication after a video consultation. The appointment cost $89, which meant I'd have to skip groceries for the week, but Piper needed help immediately. We huddled around my laptop as he spoke with the doctor, who prescribed a week's worth of medication to bridge the gap. Relief washed over Piper's face when he swallowed the first dose. But our victory was short-lived. Mother had been busy. She called my university claiming I was mentally unstable and holding my siblings hostage. The dean of students left a voicemail requesting an urgent meeting. My stomach churned as I listened to the message 3 times. I went to the meeting alone, armed with documentation from the hospital about Lynn's condition. The dean listened patiently as I explained our family situation. She seemed sympathetic but warned that any disruption to my academic performance or campus life would have consequences. I left her office feeling like I was walking a tightrope. When I returned to the apartment, I found my siblings huddled together on the couch. They'd received a package. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures from our childhood, happy moments before the golden child system started. There was a note in Mother's handwriting. "Remember when we were a real family? It's not too late to come home." Lynn started crying. Piper stared at a photo of all of us at the beach back when we still smiled genuinely. Even Ava seemed affected, tracing her finger over a picture of Mother pushing her on a swing. I wanted to grab the album and throw it away, but I couldn't. These were the only photos we had left of our childhood. The emotional manipulation continued. Mother started sending individual texts to each sibling, tailored to their specific vulnerabilities. She promised Piper she'd refill all his medications if he came home. She told Ava she'd already set aside money for her graduate school. She assured Lynn that the basement was being renovated into a proper bedroom. I watched my siblings' faces as they read these messages, the doubt creeping in, the longing for a mother who'd never truly existed. We'd escaped physically, but Mother still had hooks in their minds. Years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. Ava was the first to crack. I came home from class to find her packing her suitcase. She couldn't meet my eyes as she explained that Mother had promised to pay for her law school applications. All she had to do was come home for a week to talk things through. I tried reasoning with her, reminding her of the black eye that had barely faded. But Ava's ambition had always been her weakness, and Mother knew exactly which buttons to push. I drove Ava to the bus station in silence. At the departure gate, she hugged me quickly and whispered an apology. I watched her board the bus, knowing in my gut that this was a mistake, but I couldn't force her to stay. That would make me know better than Mother. The apartment felt emptier without Ava. Lynn and Piper grew quieter, probably wondering if they should leave, too. I threw myself into keeping them busy. We cooked elaborate meals together, played board games, went for walks around campus, anything to avoid thinking about what Ava might be experiencing back home. 3 days passed with no word from Ava. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Mother posted photos on social media of Ava studying at the dining room table, looking perfectly normal. But I knew those photos were staged. Everything in that house was a performance. On the 4th day, Piper's phone rang during dinner. It was Ava, but something was wrong. Her voice sounded flat, rehearsed. She told Piper that living with me was a mistake, that I was holding them back from their potential, that Mother had their best interests at heart. Piper put the call on speaker, and we all heard Mother whispering in the background, coaching Ava on what to say. After Ava hung up, we sat in stunned silence. Mother had broken her in just 4 days. Or maybe Ava was playing along to survive. Either way, she was lost to us for now. Lynn grabbed my hand under the table, and I squeezed it reassuringly. We couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. The next phase of Mother's campaign was more aggressive. She started showing up at my university at random times. I'd spot her car in the parking lot after class. She'd be sitting in the student union when I went for coffee. Always watching, never approaching, just reminding me that she could reach me whenever she wanted. Campus security couldn't do much since she wasn't technically harassing anyone. She had every right to be in public spaces. I started taking different routes, ducking into buildings when I saw her, feeling like prey being stalked. My grades began to slip from the stress. One afternoon, I returned from class to find my apartment door slightly open. My heart pounded as I pushed it wider. The place had been searched. Nothing stolen, but everything moved slightly. Drawers opened, papers shuffled, beds disturbed. The message was clear. Mother could get to us even here. Lynn and Piper were at the library, thankfully. I called them and told them to stay there while I filed a report with campus police. The officer took notes, but seemed skeptical. No forced entry. Nothing missing. Without evidence, they couldn't do much. I felt the walls closing in. That night, we pushed the couch against the door and took turns keeping watch. None of us slept well. In the morning, I found another note under the door. Stop this foolishness. You're hurting your siblings. A good daughter would bring them home. I was running out of money. Between the extra food, Piper's medication, and the security measures, my savings were depleted. I picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore, but it wasn't enough. Lynn offered to find a job, but she didn't have any documents. Mother had destroyed them all. The financial pressure was part of Mother's plan. She knew I couldn't support 3 people on a student budget. She was waiting for us to get desperate enough to come crawling back. I started skipping meals so my siblings could eat. They noticed but didn't say anything. 2 weeks after Ava left, she called again. This time, her voice was different. Urgent. She spoke quickly, saying Mother was at her weekly wine club. Ava told us that Mother had locked her in her room at night, that she'd been forced to study for the LSAT 16 hours a day, that Mother had taken her phone and only let her use it for supervised calls. Before we could respond, We heard a door slam in the background. Ava gasped and hung up. We tried calling back, but the number was blocked. I wanted to drive there immediately, but Lynn pointed out it could be a trap. Mother might be using Ava to lure us back. We spent hours debating what to do. Piper thought we should call the police, but what would we say? That a 20-year-old was studying too much? Lynn suggested we try to sneak Ava out during Mother's wine club, but we didn't know when that was. I felt paralyzed by indecision. The next morning changed everything. Mother had escalated beyond psychological warfare. She'd called my employer claiming I'd stolen from the register. She'd contacted my professor saying I was cheating on assignments. She'd even reached out to my roommate's parents with lies about substance use in our apartment. I spent the entire day in damage control mode. My manager reviewed security footage that proved I'd never stolen anything. My professors were understanding but concerned. My roommate's parents were harder to convince. The stress was overwhelming. Mother was systematically trying to destroy the life I built. Lynn and Piper watched me field phone calls and emails, their faces grave. They understood now that Mother wouldn't stop. She'd keep escalating until we either returned or were completely destroyed. There was no middle ground in her world. That evening, I made a decision. We couldn't keep playing defense. We needed to go on the offensive, but not in the way Mother expected. Instead of fighting her directly, we'd make ourselves impossible to find. It was time to disappear completely. I researched cities far from our hometown, places where Mother had no connections, where we could start fresh with new identities, at least socially. It would mean dropping out of school, leaving everything behind. But what choice did we have? Lynn was immediately on board. She had nothing left to lose. Piper was more hesitant. His medication situation made moving complicated. But after Mother sent him photos of his old room with the caption, "Waiting for you," he agreed. We couldn't leave Ava behind, though. Somehow we had to get her out first. I spent the next week quietly preparing. I withdrew my remaining savings and cash, packed our few belongings into boxes, gave notice at my job, telling them I had a family emergency. My professors were understanding when I explained I needed to take a leave of absence. Meanwhile, we worked on a plan to extract Ava. Lynn had an idea. She still had the password to an old email account Ava had forgotten about. We could communicate through drafts, never sending anything that Mother could intercept. It was risky, but it was our only shot. The first draft we left was simple. "We're getting out. All of us. Be ready." We checked obsessively for a response. 2 days later, Ava had written back, "Mom watches everything. Wine club is Thursday, 7 o'clock to 10 p.m. Back door broken lock." We had a window, a 3-hour opportunity while Mother was out, but it would mean driving back to the house we'd fled from, walking back into the trap. Everything in me screamed that this was a bad idea, but I couldn't abandon Ava. I rented a car under a friend's name, paying cash. We drove through the night, arriving in our hometown as the sun rose. We parked several blocks away and waited. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Normal houses with normal families. No one would guess the horror inside that perfect suburban home. Thursday evening came slowly. We watched from our car as Mother left for wine club, dressed impeccably as always. We waited another 15 minutes to make sure she wasn't coming back. Then we moved quickly. The back door was indeed broken, just as Ava had said. We slipped inside silently. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something else, fear. I remembered that smell from my childhood. We found Ava in her room, already packed. She looked thinner with dark circles under her eyes, but she was ready. We were almost to the back door when we heard it, the front door opening. Mother's voice calling out cheerfully that she'd forgotten her wine. We froze. There was no way to get to our car without her seeing us. We were trapped in our childhood home with a woman who tormented us for years. I pushed my siblings into the pantry and closed the door. We held our breath as Mother's heels clicked across the kitchen floor. She hummed while opening the wine fridge. The same tune she used to hum while deciding our punishments. My heart hammered so loudly, I was sure she'd hear it. The wine bottle clinked as she removed it. Her footsteps paused near the pantry. We pressed against the walls, trying to become invisible. After an eternity, she walked away. The front door closed. We waited another 5 minutes before emerging, our legs shaking. We ran to the car and drove away fast. No one spoke for the first hour. We were all processing what had just happened, how close we'd come to being caught, what Mother might have done if she'd found us. Ava finally broke the silence, thanking us for coming back. Her voice cracked as she described the past 2 weeks. Mother had been retraining her, making her recite the family rules every morning, punishing her for showing weakness by wanting to leave. The studying was just a cover. The real goal was to break Ava's spirit completely, to turn her into the perfect golden child who would never abandon Mother again. We drove through the night, taking turns at the wheel. By morning, we were 5 states away. I had chosen a mid-sized city with a low cost of living and a decent job market. We found a cheap motel and collapsed into beds, exhausted, but free. The next few weeks were about survival. I got a job at a restaurant lying about my experience. Lynn found work at a daycare that didn't check references too carefully. Piper got hired at a bookstore. Ava took online freelance work using her academic skills to tutor students. Together, we scraped together enough for a small apartment. It wasn't easy. We all struggled with nightmares. Piper had panic attacks in crowded spaces. Lynn flinched whenever someone raised their voice. Ava obsessively checked locks. I jumped every time my phone rang. But slowly, we began to heal. We found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and offered sliding scale payments. In group sessions, we learned to communicate without competition, to support each other without keeping score, to love without conditions. It was like learning a new language. Mother didn't give up easily. She hired a private investigator to find us. We knew because he showed up at Piper's bookstore asking questions. But we prepared for this. We'd all agreed on a story. We were cousins, not siblings. Our parents had died in an accident. We'd moved here for a fresh start. The investigator left empty-handed. The calls and messages continued for months. Mother cycled through every manipulation tactic: rage, guilt, false threats, promises. We changed our numbers. She found the new ones. We changed them again. It became a routine, like taking out the trash. 6 months into our new life, something shifted. The messages became less frequent. The attempts to find us grew half-hearted. Maybe Mother had realized we weren't coming back. Or maybe she'd found new targets for her twisted system. We didn't know and tried not to care. We celebrated our first holidays together as a real family. No achievement boards or competitions, just 4 damaged siblings learning to love each other properly. We cooked together, decorating cookies badly, and laughing about it. We gave small gifts that had nothing to do with grades or performance. Lynn started community college, studying to become a social worker. She wanted to help kids trapped in abusive homes. Piper found a better psychiatrist and got properly diagnosed and medicated. His anxiety became manageable. Ava decided against law school, realizing she'd only wanted it to win Mother's approval. She started writing instead, pouring our story into fiction that helped her process the trauma. I went back to school part-time, juggling work and classes. It was hard, but I wasn't doing it for anyone else's approval. My grades mattered only to me now. My siblings cheered when I passed my first semester. Not because I'd outranked them, but because they were genuinely proud. We still had bad days. Moments when the old patterns tried to resurface. When Piper timed how long Lynn showered, when Ava hoarded snacks, when Lynn apologized for breathing too loudly, when I caught myself comparing our achievements. But we recognized these moments now, called them out gently, worked through them together. The apartment was small and cramped. We shared 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Money was always tight, but for the first time in our lives, we felt safe. We ate dinner together at a real table. We helped each other with homework without sabotage. We celebrated each other's successes without resentment. Sometimes I wondered about other families, the ones where parents loved unconditionally, where siblings were allies, not competitors, where home meant a haven.